Clarity on Fire, a podcast for people who know what they don't want out of their life and career, but aren't sure what they'd rather be doing.
In a world where it's easy to exist, but hard to feel alive, we, Kristen
and Rachel,
two certified life and career coaches, are here to help you cut through the information overload, get unstuck, and focus not just on how you can have a career you're passionate about, but how to create a whole life that feels fulfilling.
So join us here, where we serve up inspiration and down-to-earth wisdom in a way that only two best friends can.
We want you to experience the relief of knowing that, yes, you're allowed to want more out of your life and career.
And no, you don't have to wander through the dark anymore. Our job is to light the fire that shows you the way. Let's go.
Happy Black Friday.
Happy day after Thanksgiving, we'll say.
Black Friday is a cursed holiday, and it's not a holiday. I don't like it.
I don't mind Cyber Monday, where you can just stay at home and get good deals on stuff.
Sure. Well, for those
I'm not going to fight crowds in person.
Ew. Crowds. People. Yuck. Also germs. Ugh.
Mm-hmm.
So for those of you who are bored or hiding from your family right now, just come on. We're going to have a little book club conversation. It'll get your introverted needs met, or just...
I think this is going to be a good travel podcast for a lot of people.
Yeah, your airplane podcast, your car podcast.
Long car rides.
Your, hey, cousin Ted, do you want to listen to a podcast on the way to grandma's house? And Ted's like, fine. Does anyone listen to podcasts with their cousin in the car? If you are, please let me know that I predicted the future.
I hope one person does.
Okay, so like most book club episodes, you do not have to have read this book to follow along, because Kristen and I are pulling out parts that really spoke to us, and we're expounding on them and explaining them and reflecting on them. And so this book, Maybe You Should Talk to Someone, is super popular. New York Times bestseller.
It exploded.
Lori Gottlieb is a therapist. And the premise of this book is that she goes through a breakup. She's 46 when this breakup happens. She's been with her boyfriend for 2 years. She has a son. She's like a single mom. He has grown kids, or kids who are like in college or something like that. And out of the blue, at the very beginning, I don't think this is a spoiler. This is literally like
the premise.
Yeah. He drops the bomb that he doesn't actually want to raise a kid again. He's kind of done with kids. And she's like, WTF, I've had a kid this whole time, like since we first started dating. And
for years, we've been doing this kid parenting thing.
So she ends up in therapy because her relationship just ended out of the blue, and she feels blindsided, and she needs to process it. And she's also a therapist. So
she's walking you through some experiences from, I believe, 5 of her clients. And then she is the 6th. Yeah. So she is giving you the full spectrum of what it looks like to go to a therapist and also be a therapist at the same time. It's really fascinating, the stories that she gets into and her own personal realizations that she has along the way. It's amazing. It's very much proof that much like a doctor can't necessarily always heal themselves,
surgeon can't operate on their own heart.
Exactly. You need to go to an expert, even if you are an expert.
For sure. This was very affirming for me, too, in that I resisted going to therapy. Just fun fact, Kristen and I both go to therapy off and on. And I first resisted going to therapy because I was like, well, I know my problem. And I have coach friends and I talk to them about it. And it's fine. And like, it is what it is. And I got to tell you,
not the same.
It was not the same. Going to therapy was a totally, totally different experience for me. And we can talk more when it's appropriate. Like there will be a natural time in this conversation about going to coaching, like coaching versus therapy. But I got to tell you, the reason I needed therapy was because I didn't have any goals I was looking to meet. I literally just needed to process feelings.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the best reasons to like go to therapy in the first place is, or to know that you're headed in the right direction, is if you really don't have anything in particular you're like wanting to work toward, like, I need to get a new job, or that's certainly not the only thing. It's like, no, I have a ton of unhealed baggage and I have a lot of feelings, or I'm really stuck, or I'm really depressed or I'm feeling really anxious.
I need to process it. I need to maybe understand it a bit better.
So
and I need to heal it.
Yes.
And yes, of course you are going to move on. But the therapist is not so much being like, hey, here's what we're going to do with this.
Here's your goals. Let's work backwards. That's not what they do.
Right. That's what a coach does.
So I've just pulled out a bunch of things that really stood out to us when we read this book. And we're going to go through them kind of like bullet by bullet, which sounds boring, but I think it's not going to be boring.
Well, the book's not boring. So
no,
what we share from the book is not going to be boring.
But what we're sharing is not at all the plot of the book, which is great. Like you can hear this whole conversation and still read the book and know, 98% we're not going to talk about. But we're just going to pull out a couple of things that I think are thematically really interesting. That's more what I'm interested in talking about.
Yep.
So one of the first things I wanted to share was a quote from the very beginning. And she says, I remember hearing the writer Andrew Solomon tell a story about a married couple he'd met at a conference. During the course of the day, he said, each spouse had confessed independently to him to taking antidepressants, but didn't want the other to know. It turned out that they were hiding the same medication in the same house. No matter how open we as a society are about formerly private matters, the stigma around our emotional struggles remains formidable. We'll talk with almost anyone about our physical health. Can you imagine anyone hiding from their spouse, like their reflux medication? Even our sex lives we'll talk about, but bring up anxiety or depression or an intractable sense of grief, and the expression on the face looking back at you will probably read, get me out of this conversation pronto.
Now, I feel like I live in a bubble because I exclusively talk about feelings, but I know that is not the norm. A lot of people don't feel like they can share. And I've had a lot of clients tell me, I feel so anxious. I feel like I have a lot of anxiety, or I feel like I might be kind of depressed. And I don't really tell anyone because it's awkward. I don't want them to look at me weird, and I don't want there to be any kind of a stigma, on and on. The reasons why we feel ashamed for our emotions, especially for our negative emotions.
I think it has so much to do with biology. This sort of really animalistic instinct to not show the pack that you're weak, that you're the weak one, because you might be the one making the pack.
You might get ostracized.
Yeah, you're right. They might be like, we can't afford to take care of this sick little weak one. And she's going to bring us all down and she's going to get us all eaten. So we're going to have to leave her out in the cold. I really think it has a lot to do with not wanting people to realize that you're weak. And obviously, anxiety and depression and, wounds and all of the things we go to therapy for do not make us weak. They're usually the bedrock for what allows us to become strong if we're willing to work through it.
And also, we're not the only ones feeling this.
Clearly.
There's
two spouses in the same house feeling the same thing, not feeling like they can talk to each other about it. Like, that is such a problem.
You're so afraid of feeling lonely that you don't want to share this in case someone betrays you or abandons you.
Or thinks less of you.
You end up feeling lonely in your not sharing when probably you would have connected with someone by saying, hey, sometimes I feel anxious, or sometimes I get really frustrated or overwhelmed or whatever.
Or I'm a rage monster.
They're going to say, I'm a human too. I also feel those things.
So the reason I wanted to share that from the beginning was just to set the tone of, we need to talk about this. And I think that people are becoming more and more okay with talking about it, but it is okay to talk about it. It's normal to talk about it. People in the same house are going through it and not talking about it.
We're good examples that you can have friendships based almost entirely on sharing your emotional state and processing that together.
Yeah, on your weird mental abnormalcy.
Yep.
Okay.
So I want to move on to a really interesting and very accurate part of this there, where she describes that we're really all unreliable narrators. I know you guys have read those crime mysteries where there's an unreliable. They're very popular right now to have an unreliable narrator.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you see it on TV all the time too.
Yeah, because it makes for a really interesting story. But we don't realize that's actually a reflection of real life.
No, we are the worst narrator of our own experience.
And it's not that we're purposely misleading ourselves or other people. It's just that there's so many interpretations of an event or a particular story, and we're more likely to align with the ones that feel most accurate to us or that it's our first gut instinct. Well, that must be true. So we really latch on to that.
Or it just affirms our own worldview.
And we don't recognize, hey, there might be some other viewpoints here. So we have a little bit of a warped view.
So one of the things she says in the book is a much better form of narration is one that's flexible. She said, when people come to therapy, I'm listening to their narratives, but also for their flexibility with their narratives. Do they consider what they're saying to be the only version of the story, the quote unquote accurate version? Or do they know that theirs is just one of many ways to tell it? Are they aware of what they're choosing to leave in or out, of how their motivation is sharing the story affects how the listener hears it?
I have to say, this is also a very good indicator of a person who's extremely coachable.
Yeah, I mean,
I look for the same thing.
So many of the things she said in this book, I was like, yes, this also makes you coachable.
Yes. This just means I'm willing to reconsider my beliefs about things, about myself, and change my mentality, change my outlook, change my perspective. And that's how you know you can make a lot of progress. If you're even just willing to do that, even if you don't know how, but you're willing to see something from a different perspective, that's a much healthier approach.
And just to know that you are an unreliable narrator is helpful.
Yep.
Because then
you don't take yourself so seriously.
Yeah, and you might not know what the better narration is, but just knowing this is probably not super accurate when you're having a spiral for sure.
Yeah.
That's one of the worst things we can do when we're having a spiral is take ourselves incredibly seriously and believe every word of what we're saying. And so just the foundational truth that you are the worst narrator of your own experience should be comforting in that, oh, I don't actually have to buy lock, stock, and barrel or believe every press release, I'm making about myself. Like, trust but verify everything you read on the internet. Trust but verify everything you think. Because
yes.
Especially about yourself, it's pretty much just as inaccurate as the stuff you find on the internet.
Definitely.
So can I make a slight rant as one of my next points?
Sure.
Okay, so she goes through this breakup and immediately, she's telling her friends, and let's be clear, these are women in their mid to late 40s. So we're not talking about mid to late 20s. Could understand that. Talking 2 decades older than that. And her friends are all pushing her back into dating. Her oldest friend right after the breakup is literally like, go sleep with someone. It'll take your mind off your ex. I hate this to my utter core. The fact that she's telling a therapist that offends me even more because I'm like, if you really understood that profession and if people really treated breakups the way I believe that they should treat breakups, there would be absolutely no pressure for anyone to go back into the dating world because what they would realize is that it's not the boyfriend that was broken and you just need a new one. There's something I need to reflect on in my experience. I need to take some time. I need to chill the F out. I need to get clear on how are my wounds contributing to the fact that I was in this relationship that turned badly so quickly and I didn't see it coming. There's so much internal work that needs to be done after a breakup and people don't want to do that. They just want to gloss right over it and run on to the next thing without healing any of their problems. And I am over it.
Well, this is such good proof of why even well-intentioned advice is so unhelpful.
Terrible.
Because these people are saying, here's what I would do. Not necessarily here's the best thing for you, not necessarily the healthiest approach. Maybe it's not even what they would do. It's just, here's what I hear is common advice. I don't know what to say to you right now, so I'm just going to say this. So you don't want to take people's advice so seriously. To be honest, this is why coaching and therapy are such helpful models of communication. It's because there is no advice giving in that space.
There shouldn't be if you're doing it. If you're in there with the right person, you shouldn't be getting advice.
Yeah, if you're getting a bunch of advice, you don't have a coach or a therapist. You have a consultant or you have a mentor or something.
Or a friend.
Or a friend.
Or a mother.
So when you go to your friends for advice, they might be really trying to help, but please take that with a grain of salt.
Mm-hmm. And just
run that through your own internal filter because it might be dead wrong for you.
And just know that moving on too quickly after a breakup is going to guarantee you another breakup with a different person in a different skin suit. Same person, same problems, slightly different skin suit.
This would be the same thing with a job, by the way.
I mean,
jump
yeah.
right out of one job and right into the next without any introspection, without any trying to clarify, hey, what maybe didn't go so well? Maybe what do I want to bring to this next one? How do I want to clarify my search? Just going to be in the same situation.
Personally, I don't trust people who can't be by themselves, who don't like spending time by themselves and can't be alone. It's a red flag. It's a red flag if you can't spend a significant amount of time by yourself. It doesn't mean you have to like every minute of it, but it does mean that there's something you're probably trying to run from or actively not see or deal with.
You're probably anxiously attached. If you have not heard our episode on the attachment styles, you might want to listen to that one.
Go back to October, I think that was. Side chat.
I think so.
Okay.
So what I thought was really interesting was almost right away, Lori's therapist tells her, you're not just grieving this breakup. You're grieving something much bigger than this.
Which
and
she resists hardcore.
She's like, no. I'm here because of the breakup. That's why I'm here. I was fine, and then I had a breakup, and now I'm not fine. So that's what I'm here for.
Yeah.
And to quote her, she says, he knows what all therapists know, that the presenting problem, the issue that somebody comes in with, is often just one aspect of a much larger problem, if not a red herring entirely. People are brilliant at finding ways to filter out the things they don't want to look at using distractions or defenses to keep threatening feelings at bay. And that's exactly what she was doing. This was actually a lot more about death.
Her aging and her contemplating the fact that her life was half over and there were a lot of things she hadn't achieved, and she's dealing throughout this book with a mystery illness that she can't get to the bottom of, which is scaring her.
Yeah. And she's solely responsible for her son.
She has a young son who's like 8 years old. And so she's contemplating, like, what if I get really ill and can't take care of my kid? Am I dying? Could I die? Will I die earlier than I thought? And so she's grieving a lot of her life, like the life that she's already lived and the life that she,
thought she was going to
have with this, with her partner and then not. So he immediately points that out, which is so astute. And like, if you have a good therapist or a good coach, they almost immediately can see past your red herring or your presenting problem.
They see what's underneath, what you're not saying, but what's there.
Sometimes it'll take you a while to catch up to what they're seeing, but that's right there is the benefit of you need someone like that in your life who is not a friend, who doesn't even know you at all because they can see you without any lens of bias. And it is like being X-rayed, but in the best, it's kind of vulnerable, but in the best way.
Mm-hmm. I love that even a therapist is like, that's not it.
No, that's not why I'm here. And she resisted that for a while.
She did.
So another really interesting point. I just love this so much. She introduces a topic or an idea that I did not know about. She says it's important not to fall prey to what the Buddhists call idiot compassion. In idiot compassion, you avoid rocking the boat to spare people's feelings, even though the boat needs rocking and your compassion ends up being more harmful than your honesty. Its opposite is wise compassion, which means caring about the other, but also giving him or her a loving truth bomb when needed. She was obviously using this in the context of a good therapist is someone who gives you wise compassion, not idiot compassion.
No.
Because almost everyone else in your life will dole out idiot compassion, which is almost can be enabling you.
Or no compassion, where they might point things out, but they're not bringing that compassion to the table, so you just want to shut it down. So it is a really particular kind of person in your life who can very lovingly, but very directly point out things that you maybe don't want to see, but that in the long run will serve you. They're not just going to complain with you. They're not just going to say, yeah, you're right. Yeah, he sucks. Why did he break up with you? Right? They're going to be like, hey, there's some stuff to look at here. Maybe let's focus on this.
Yeah, they're not interested in sparing your feelings at the expense of your long-term growth. Like, it's like, how are we going to help this person long-term get where she wants to go? And short-term, we can't spare her feelings if that's where we want to go. And a lot of the time, the people in your life will be trying to spare your feelings by not giving you the full truth or not.
And that's okay. It's not really their job.
No, it's not their job. But again, that's kind of why you need someone else to step into that role, because very few people in your life can or are qualified to give you that kind of compassion.
Yep.
That kind of tough love. Also, I love idiot compassion because I think it's really important to note how often we are doling out idiot compassion when we should probably be doling out wise compassion to people in our lives.
Yeah. You people pleasers out there.
Exactly.
This is going to be a little harder for you.
Confession. Oh, it's so mean, but that's kind of why I love it. It gets right to the point.
Yep. Lori also shares a quote from the late psychotherapist John Weekland. It's so good. Before successful therapy, it's the same damn thing over and over. After successful therapy, it's one damn thing after another.
That is the best summary of my life.
Yes.
That's why I put this on the outline.
But the patterns you're not just doing the same old pattern.
No, it's
over and
just,
over again.
oh my
You've
God,
broken the pattern.
This new thing?
Yep.
Oh God, this new thing?
Yep. But life is going to keep bringing you more stuff.
Yeah. So that's the point. So therapy does not make your problem, or coaching. The point is that therapy does not make your problems disappear. It's more about knowing and also unknowing yourself. Those are two different things, but kind of the same
knowing
coin,
the real
two sides
you,
of the same
unknowing
coin.
the parts of you that are not really
that you've adopted.
The genuine you.
Yeah, the false beliefs and the insecurities and the fears and the societal programming and
the
all
ways
of that.
you feel like you should be.
It's about knowing and unknowing yourself so that you kind of take the sharp edges off of your life and you have the ability to respond immensely better to life. So it is not about like having a perfect life. You guys should know this by now. But she's just emphasizing the point that any good therapy, and again, I'm going to say coaching too, because this is exactly how I feel about the work that we do in the world, is not about having a perfect life or getting you to the point where you don't have problems, because life equals problems. Life will always dole out new challenges. And honestly, you would be bored if you never had to solve another problem in your life. Your brain would melt into a puddle of mush. It wouldn't be helpful.
You'd be blissed out for a few months and then you would get bored.
You would get so bored. So
because there's no growth, and humans are wired to have growth. And so you want opportunities for growth, but you don't want the same cycles happening over and over and over again that are maddening.
That's not growth. Like getting the same problem.
It's stagnation in the same problem.
It's insanity. It's Einstein's definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So what she's saying that therapy gets you is different problems, and like you have the ability to respond better to those problems, but you're not repeating the same ones over and over. You're getting new ones. Yeah. And like that can be great. And sometimes it can suck, and that's life. But that's the point. And I love the realness of that.
Mm-hmm. So I thought it was really interesting that she had a patient. A lot of her patients were younger or middle-aged, but she had one who was a bit older, who'd been married 3 times and was still struggling with romantic relationships. And it was about to be her 70th birthday.
Yeah. And she was like, it was kind of dark. She was contemplating ending her life.
Yeah. She was like, I'm not sure if I want to keep doing this.
And it was amazing, the turnaround she went through. I'm not going to go through all of it. We don't even have time to get into most of her patients that she worked with in this book, which is good because then you can read it and be totally surprised by all the stories. But there was this quote that I'm like, oh, it's this. This is the thing about Rita, the 70-year-old woman. She says, each time a relationship ended, Rita was shocked to find herself alone. But her history didn't surprise me. We marry our unfinished business.
That last line.
That's like 5 words. And it's the truest thing maybe in this whole book. Mm-hmm. If you do not solve your unfinished business, and she's talking about her parents because Rita's came from an alcoholic kind of broken home. And guess what? She married a series of abusive alcoholic men. Yep. It's no shock that happened because she never healed the underlying baggage from her childhood that made her feel unlovable. And that's what we do, is we find partners who mirror or mimic unhealed patterns with the people who raised us because we're trying to get the love we never got, or we're trying to fix those people in a way that we couldn't fix our parents, for example.
And this is why it's so helpful to have that objective viewpoint, because Rita kept being surprised every time, but Lori is like, this makes so much sense. And it is really helpful to have someone come in and say, hey, you're not crazy for being caught off guard every time. This makes sense. Let's explore why this makes sense. And let's change the pattern so you don't keep being surprised by this happening anymore, because it's not happening anymore. But yeah, you can you can be struggling with the same patterns into your 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Without doing it if you don't do the work.
That should scare you.
Yeah. The goal of therapy, she describes, is emotional sobriety. I love this term. It's essentially just the ability to regulate your feelings without self-medicating. And that medication can come from substances, defenses, affairs, the internet, all kinds of things.
All of the things that you would assume people medicate with.
Yeah. And so when you're not emotionally sober, you have to get your fix some way, shape, or form because you don't know how to handle your emotions in a healthy way without some kind of a substance or something to come in and give you a jolt of happiness to numb it out for a little while.
To reference another book that's not at all relevant. Well, it is relevant, but I listened to Jonathan Van Ness's memoir recently, Over the Top on Audible. And he talked so much about how he never learned to like self-soothe in a healthy way as a child. And so his soothing behaviors became often like binge eating.
Addictions.
Yeah, addictions. And like sex addiction too.
Yeah.
And so much of what he said, the work he did in therapy was learning how to soothe himself in ways that were productive and healthy and learning how to channel his emotions in a way that didn't destroy his life and didn't actually take away from his life. And so I absolutely love the concept of emotional sobriety, like being the kind of person who can feel their feelings and process their own hurts and the things that happen in the world without needing to lean on or escape into anything.
Yes.
You know, being able to sit with it and let that wave kind of crash over you and breathe through the discomfort and then, get back up and keep going at life.
Yep. Yeah. The goal is that you don't need anything else to do it. You can do it for yourself.
And it's okay if sometimes you need a little comfort.
Well,
you need no one's perfect.
Wanting like friends to comfort you, wanting.
But like even sometimes slipping up is not.
Sure.
Is not.
But that's different
inhuman.
Than relying on that.
Yes, consistently relying on drinking too much wine or consistently relying on scrolling through Instagram for 2 hours a day because you're trying to numb out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so eventually, returning to Lori's plot, through therapy, she starts to admit that her relationship ending shouldn't have been as much as a surprise as it was to her. There were things that she didn't want to see, just like her patients didn't want to see things. So I'm going to read
again.
this.
You can be a big old spotlight on people's stuff, but to be it for yourself, that's hard.
So here's something I thought was really interesting was like her finally kind of acknowledging the stuff that she didn't want to see. She said, on one of our early dates, when my boyfriend and I were in the midst of infatuation and had hours-long conversations about anything and everything, he mentioned that before meeting me, he'd gone on a few dates with a woman he really liked, but when he'd learned that she had some difficulty with her joints that made it hard for her to go hiking, he'd stopped seeing her. I asked him why. After all, she didn't have an acute illness. It sounded more like a common case of arthritis, and we were middle-aged after all. Besides, my boyfriend wasn't even a hiker. He said, I don't want to have to take care of her if she gets really sick one day, he said over our shared dessert. If we'd been married for 20 years and then she got sick, that's different. But why get into it knowing she's already sick?
Ooh.
So,
and this is while she's having her own
health
issue.
I
thought she was already having some symptoms.
No, I think it started during their relationship, but I think on their first date, no, she hadn't had any of those issues yet. But she's looking back and she's going, oh, that was a red flag. The fact that he wasn't willing to potentially like take care of someone if they got sick. It's almost like he didn't want to deal with any inconvenience.
Well, and
that's like her kid was an inconvenience right?
It's especially a red flag when you have a kid because they are going to need you to be responsible and take care of them and sometimes put yourself behind their needs.
Right. Also, I feel like as a therapist, she probably should have seen through the fact that like if someone said to me on a date, like she had arthritis, I would have been like, that's bullshit. What's that really about? You know what I mean? And the fact that like she actually took that at face value, like that was his reason for not continuing to date her. I find that That's probably not the reason that he didn't want to date her. That was the reason he gave. And the fact that she didn't dig into that is interesting. But people don't dig into things when they don't want to see something.
Yep.
And for whatever reason, like, she liked him. She didn't want to see the problems with him. And so she, tricked herself. I mean, she was good. We're
all good.
We're all pretty good at self-sabotaging. Or at least
again,
denial.
We're all those unreliable narrators to ourselves.
Right. So just know that, like, if she can do it, you can do it.
Yeah.
And
she's
we're
good
all
at this
doing
thing. She
it
does
to a
this
degree.
every day. And even she can be duped. We can all be duped.
So related to that.
Yeah, she describes a scholar and psychiatrist named Irvin Yalom. And he references that humans have 4 ultimate concerns. Like, it all boils down to these 4 things: death, isolation, freedom, and meaninglessness.
Mm-hmm. So Lori realizes that death and aging, like we said earlier, have been one of the 4 concerns that's actually been motivating her. And that the grief over the boyfriend thing is, again, more so about one of these ultimate concerns than it is just about her boyfriend.
Yeah. She says, I try to wrap my mind around this paradox. If I screw up my life, I can engineer my own death rather than have it happen to me. If I stay in a doomed relationship, if I mess up my career, if I hide in fear instead of facing what's wrong with my body, I can create a living death, but one where I call the shots. That was the kind of unconscious reasoning that she was doing.
Well, I think everyone does this. And I think the description of creating a living death, but one where you can call the shots, is so accurate and descriptive of what so many people are doing, which is,
because you want that control.
I would rather have control and certainty, even if it sucks, than step into something unknown and have no idea what's going to happen and be out of control. Like, that is how much we are married to the idea of control and certainty. It's like, we'd rather self-sabotage and know it's happening, like, than encounter something new and different and scary. And, like, even she can do that.
Yeah, we don't want to be blindsided. Mm-hmm. We want to know, even if it's kind of crappy.
Yeah, so I just, just like, are you actually living, or are you creating a living death where you get to call the shots?
Yeah. And I know that she really zoned in on the death concern out of those 4. Mm-hmm. But we're all scared of all of these. We're all...
isolation, freedom, meaninglessness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are deep human concerns.
Yeah.
We're terrified of death, terrified of isolation, really craving freedom. And we're all afraid it's all meaningless.
Yeah, what's the point?
Yeah.
Right. So I like those because often those are kind of like shortcuts to, what am I really concerned about? It's probably one of these 4 things.
These are the deepest that they're going to go.
Right. So if I'm really struggling, it's probably ultimately at its core about death, isolation, freedom or lack thereof, and meaninglessness.
I mean, our clients come to us for a lot of these.
I mean, I can just check all those boxes for myself.
Yeah.
Totally can.
Scary stuff.
Okay, the last thing I want to get into, but it's kind of major, but it's really good, is...
Like major as in like 5 parts.
It's kind of long, but it's the last thing I want to get into in this book, is she goes over the 5 stages of change, and she illustrates it through the lens of her alcoholic. I mean, she's probably like 25, like really young alcoholic patient named Charlotte. So and like, obviously this is applicable to you if you don't have an addiction. This is just...
This is the most clear example that she could use out of her patients. But we're all going through these stages whenever any potential change is coming into our lives. And the people
around you are in these stages. And so it's helpful to understand that sometimes people are in a stage where they're not ready to make a change. And so to understand that there's a time at which people usually actually start to take action, and that you can't force them into a stage that they're not ready to be in.
Nope.
So stage 1 is called pre-contemplation. At this place, you're not even thinking about changing. Sometimes you're in outright denial. So Charlotte, in therapy, would talk about her mom's tendency to self-medicate with alcohol, but she would deny any connection like to her own alcohol use. She would say things like, well, people my age go out and drink, and well, never mind me, my mom is the one with the problem. Complete
So
denial.
much denial.
Complete denial. Not even all ready to acknowledge that there's a problem.
I love the pre-contemplation. Like, there's actually no contemplation happening.
Right.
You're just hopefully getting ready to
One
contemplate.
day you might contemplate the fact that you have a problem.
Yeah. So then stage 2 is contemplation. This is where you are ready to start thinking about, maybe there's a problem here. So you've got growing awareness of whatever the problem is or whatever needs changing, but there's still a lot of resistance to doing something about it. So in Charlotte's example, she got a DUI, which kind of made her a little bit more aware of the problem.
Right, she couldn't stay in denial quite as easily once she had a DUI.
But that doesn't mean she's ready to stop drinking. She's not ready to do anything about it yet.
She didn't do anything about it.
She was just willing to acknowledge, okay, maybe this is a little bit of a problem. And this is a hard stage, first of all, to be in, because you see the problem, but you're not willing to take action yet. It's really hard to see other people in this stage because you're seeing them even saying out loud, yeah, this is kind of a problem. But they're not willing to do anything yet. And
then they
really
keep going back to the same thing over and over, the same dude over and over.
You want to shake them. But like, that's just the stage that they're in, and they have to be there for a little while.
This is, interestingly, the stage where people often start therapy.
And that makes sense because they're saying there's a problem. And they're also saying, I don't know how to fix it.
And I'm not sure I want to do anything about it, but I kind of know that I need to talk about it. Sort of, maybe. I don't know. So that is maybe the biggest difference I saw in this book between therapy and coaching. You don't get hardly anyone starting coaching in a contemplation phase.
No, they're ready to take action.
Yeah. They've gotten to a place where, they've gotten to at least the third, usually the fourth stage.
Yeah.
That's the difference between therapy and coaching. And honestly, this explains a lot about why I was so annoyed for like a lot of the time reading this book. Not because the book was bad or because it was like, I was frustrated because I was like, people, get your shit together. Hurry it up now.
But keep in mind, we're coaches reading this. Like, and we're ready to, hey, let's take action. What are you going to do about this? Because that's our whole ideology. That's the whole way we work with our clients and with ourselves. But that's not always useful if you're not in a stage where you are ready to think about
you just
certainly
need to
take
process
action.
Your feelings, and you need to you just need to delve really deep.
You need to see things a bit more clearly, and like, you know you do, but you're a little bit afraid. That's when therapy is so helpful because they're not going to push you into action too quickly.
No, they're going to take their time. That's what was. Oh my God, they were taking so much time. It validated my decision not to become a therapist because I was like, I can't do this. Oh my God, I can't sit here for 6 months and watch people go glacier pace progress. And like, she's enjoying it, like the slowness of the progress. I'm like, I need faster momentum than this.
And that's why different methodologies are just better for certain people.
Right.
So, because you can't push someone in the contemplation stage into action.
No.
It's not going to work.
It's not going to work.
They need people to support them in the stage that they are at.
So after contemplation, so awareness you have a problem, but super resistant to taking action, is stage 3, preparation, which is you're kind of gearing yourself up to make an actual change. In Charlotte's case, that means she didn't stop drinking, but she started to bargain with herself by cutting back and reading about addiction online. So she's kind of like, I'm going to jump off this cliff and I'm just going to stand here and I'm kind of going to like, wiggle a little bit on the edge and I'm going to like kind of like test the wind and I'm going to look and see how far down is that. So she's contemplating it and she's kind of preparing to jump, but she's not jumping.
This is a stage where you start to see more people coming to coaching because they're at least
like maybe on the verge of coaching.
They're afraid.
At this point.
They're afraid to take action, but they also know at some point I got to take action.
Yeah.
And I know that I got to take action and I'm going to start getting myself ready to take some action, but like, not yet. Not yet. Don't push me too quickly.
Yeah. This might be where they want to have a conversation about coaching, but they're not quite sure they want to do it.
Yeah. And sometimes people know that it can be helpful to have accountability when you're ready to take action. So they're like, okay, if I'm getting ready to do this, I may not push myself.
Yeah.
So the next section, this makes sense, is action. This is where you are willing to finally do something about the problem. You're willing to make that change. So for Charlotte's example, she asked Lori for a recommendation for an outpatient alcohol treatment program. And that's when she stopped drinking. entirely. So she's like, okay, it's time.
Yeah.
I got to do something about this. This is really ruining my life. And what do I do?
So then stage 5 is maintenance. This means that the person has upheld the change for a significant period of time, which isn't to say that people don't backslide. It's just that in this stage, if you backslide, you can usually get back on track with, the right support. So in Charlotte's case, she had stopped drinking and she'd, maintained that. So she was actually making progress in her life. She was applying to grad school. She got involved in a charitable organization and she made new friends who weren't drinking focused. And she was able to start unpacking her relationship with her parents in a more productive way because the focus was no longer on getting her to stop drinking. It was, well, now I can grow and now I can change and now I can evolve because I don't have this thing weighing me down anymore. And so she's not only maintaining it, but she's actually building momentum.
Yeah.
And that's totally action. We meet people at coach, people step into, I think the divide between therapy and coaching absolutely happens around the action phase.
Yeah.
Sometimes a little before, sometimes a little after.
3.5 on average.
Yeah. But you often do meet people in that phase where they've maybe gone to therapy and they've gone from I was really depressed and I had to focus on just getting my shit together. I went from dysfunctional to functional and now I am functional and I'm maintaining it, but I want to get to optimal. And sometimes that's when coaching becomes the most helpful is because you have a solid foundation and you're not a complete mess, you can function, but you're okay, but what's my career direction? Or what do I really want out of life? And what's my life purpose? And those are things that are usually more appropriate to talk about in coaching versus therapy, I have found.
I would say that the maintenance stage or what you're going to have to do to maintain whatever change can be scary enough that it can cause a lot of anxiety in the earlier stages. Because if Charlotte had recognized earlier, hey, I have to do something about this, I might have to get all new friends.
Yeah, that's
I might have to dig into the deep,
maybe I don't talk to my parents.
Relationship I have with my parents and how that's contributing to this. I'm going to have to look at stuff I don't want to look at.
I'm going to have to date different men who don't drink.
I might have to take a leave of absence and go to an outpatient clinic for a little while.
Way too much. So overwhelming.
And once you're actually in the maintenance phase, it feels so much better because you're okay, now I made the change. The hard part feels over at that point. And now it's how do I keep it going? But the fear of what you're going to have to do there can make you stay stuck in the earlier stages a little longer. And that's normal.
Yeah. And a therapist has a lot of patience. I think that one of the best things I took from this book is that a good therapist is so patient.
Yes.
They will help you make teeny tiny progress over months and years if need be, but they will do their best to get you there. And
because they have a very good sense of when to push and when not to push.
Yeah.
So that you can keep making progress even if it feels not as fast as you might want it to be.
Yeah.
But that's on purpose. Because in those earlier stages, you can't rush it.
No. So the last thing to tie this up is that at the very end, Lori takes a pause, what they call, instead of stopping therapy, they're calling it a pause in the conversation between her and her therapist, whose pseudonym in this book was Wendell, which is hilarious. What a name. And I just wanted to end by saying it's totally normal and healthy to not always be in therapy. In coaching, people kind of know. I mean, we've made it pretty clear that coaching is not a 24/7 thing. You come in, you're with us for 6 or 12 sessions, and maybe you come back, a couple years later because you have something else different happening in your life that you want to work through. Because again, life gives you a new problem.
Yep.
But in therapy, it seems like people just have a therapist and they go for 10 years and they just go every week or every other week for 10 years. And it's is that normal? And I think that the answer is different for different people. But I actually think taking pauses in the conversation is healthy and gives you a perspective you don't have when you're not, when you're on your own.
Yeah, I think it's almost critical for self-reliance because if you are always looking to someone else to help you process your emotions, eventually you don't know for sure, could I do this without the therapist or could I do this without the coach? And I think it's a really healthy thing to take pauses sometimes, learn to be your own therapist, learn to do your own self-soothing And you can always go back if you discover something else that you need to process that feels a little sticky. Or same thing in coaching. If you realize, okay, I tried some of the things we talked about together and I'm ready to get into the next challenge, or there's a new phase of things I want to explore. Great. But I don't know that it's necessary to have that kind of support person all the time without fail for years and years on it.
So in my example, I haven't been in pre-contemplation in a long time in that stage because I'm too friggin' self-aware now to be completely in denial about most things. But I was in contemplation about therapy for a long time. I knew it was a possibility and I knew I was struggling, but I was like, no, I don't think I need that right now. And what was hilarious is I spent about 20 minutes in the preparation phase after having spent a year in the contemplation phase, because when I decide to do something, I just do it. And so I researched the therapist for 10 minutes, 20 minutes. And I was like, okay, I'm doing it. And then I went straight to action.
I think it's a good point though, because different people are going to spend a different amount of time in each phase. For some people, they won't contemplate for very long, but then they'll prepare, they'll research, and they'll check into everything.
I'm just take the freaking action or not. I go from just thinking about it to doing it with a 20-minute break in the middle, maybe. And now I'm more in maintenance. I'm not actively going to therapy at this moment. I'm very willing to go back when I need to process something. But it's been helpful to see how am I doing on my own? And how am I processing? How am I kind of integrating what we talked about and applying it to my life? And how am I doing it, maintaining my work? And I'm doing okay. So, I mean, there's always issues and things that pop up, but I'm not devolving into depression or complete and utter chaos or anything like that. So I'm all right. Yeah. So I think that
again, you can start to trust yourself a bit. Okay, I got this.
So that's that. That was maybe you should talk to someone. And I really like the title of the book because it's the kind thing that people say to your friends when you're I don't know what to do with you, but I think that you're having problems I can't really quite solve for you.
It's a very loving way versus let me just tell you what I think you should do.
That's pretty much what one of my friends told me when she was I think you might need a therapist. She was maybe you should talk to a therapist. Man, you want to talk to mine? And I did. I was just, sure, I'll talk to yours. I didn't want to have to do any work or research. So it's also okay to tell someone that.
It can be a very loving thing.
Yeah, permission to gently, nudge someone into therapy. But again, if they're in contemplation and they're not ready to do it, you can't force them into preparation or action.
You can plant seeds that may or may not grow later.
Yeah, totally. So, okay, well, as we're wrapping up, I wanted to remind you, we've talked about this a couple times so far, I believe. I mean, at the time I've recorded this, I haven't, but I'm assuming by this time I've talked about it a couple times. Just wanted to remind you that in a couple weeks, December 10th through December 17th, so just 1 week, we're going to be doing a little holiday special on our Passion Profile short course, which if you are new to us, what are you doing? You got to go take the Passion Profile quiz. You got to figure out what the intersection between your career and your passion is so that you can figure out your career direction and know how you're supposed to work. Not what you're supposed to be doing, how you're supposed to work. It's so much more important.
Which helps you narrow down what you should be doing.
Yes. So,
and then if you want to get really clear on how to apply that to your next job or your current job, maybe you want to prepare for 2020.
How about the next decade that we're about to go into?
Seriously, this could be a good time to get very clear on what's going to be a good fit for me career-wise and what maybe isn't. And how do I align better with how I'm already wired? That's what this whole course is about.
So we're going to be doing, I don't have all the details yet. We will by the time this goes live on December 10th. There will be a little discount code. Just know that. We'll give it, in email when on December 10th when that happens. So if you're not on our email list, just take the Passion Profile quiz and opt in. Not that hard. You'll figure it out. But we're also going to be giving away a bonus. In addition to it being cheaper, we're also going to be doing a workshop just for people who sign up for the short course in January. We'll set the date later, but it'll be in early January. And we'll do a workshop about I kind of want to call it like an anti-resolution, like an anti-New Year's resolution workshop.
Because we all know how well resolutions turn out.
Right. So like if those don't work, then let's do something the opposite of that. And I assume that'll work better. Like we'll do kind of like a goal setting, but like the right way and getting, clear on your career direction in 2020.
Yeah, you're still allowed to want to be intentional in the new year.
Sure.
But setting random resolutions that you'll forget
That's
about
not
in
gonna
2
work.
weeks, that doesn't work for anyone. Let's find something better.
Yeah.
We're going to help you with that.
So we will give that away too to anyone who decides to buy the short course, which is available 24/7. It's always available, but we don't promote it very often. So,
and this is a really good time.
Yeah.
Going to a new year.
You're going to be on a plane anyway or in a car. You can be listening to us. It's not that long. It's like 5-ish hours of content. Yes, there's some like PDF activities. So if you get car sick, maybe you don't want to be writing. But it's enough that you can get it done over your holiday break.
Yep. And you have lifetime access. So even if you want to wait until you want to buy it now, but you want to start it
February,
in January or whatever, you've got it. So,
sure. Okay. So we'll tell you more about that as it becomes closer to the day, but just wanted to like prime you, prepare you for that. And we will see you, I don't know, I think our next book club will be in January. And I haven't picked the book yet, but I will let you know when we do. Yeah, I actually have another idea too. Okay. So we'll have to like pick whatever book we're going to read, but we'll let you know so that you can prepare if you want to read with us for January, because we do this whenever there are 5 Fridays in the month, in case you didn't know.
Yeah, and we'd love to hear your comments. I'm sure some of you have already read this book because, again, it's super popular right now. So share some of your thoughts, your takeaways, favorite parts, whatever. We can keep the book club conversation going over on our website. We'll link to where this post lives on the site.
Okay. We will see you on Tuesday with some kind of a blog. I don't know. That's all I know.
See you then.
Bye.